So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this FFplus webinar for innovation studies. Today, our presenter will be Dr. Guy Lonsdale from Scapos, and he is also the Open Call lead, who will provide you more information about this Open Call and about the Fortissimo initiative. So the webinar will be recorded. You can put some additional questions in the chat box. I will meanwhile provide some links that will be useful for you, and also materials that will be provided in this webinar with links will be also handed to you after the meeting. Otherwise, the Q&A session will be provided after the presentation, so feel free to raise your hand and ask the questions in live mode. So enjoy, and Guy, if you're ready, then we can start.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen. Yeah, so this is the second webinar today about the FFplus first set of calls. For those of you who saw the earlier webinar, the first part of this presentation will be the same as that one, in the background about the project. But then we'll be focusing on the second type of call, which is for innovation studies for the development of generative AI models. And I'll explain the differences to what's been seen before on what we're particularly looking for with this call or this sub-call. So without further ado, I'll give you first an intro to the Fortissimo approach, a bit of history, and then introduction to the FFplus project very briefly. And then, as I said, I'll focus on the type 2 call 1, which is about the innovation studies for the development of generative AI models. And I'll explain the objectives of the call, our expectations for proposals and studies, and then funding and eligibility conditions. And finally, I'll wrap up providing with some info sources and submission procedure before we go into the QA session. So this is the very overview of the very first two Fortissimo projects. The very first Fortissimo project started in 2013. And the second one overlapped slightly. There was a focus on using what we call then an HPC cloud, but actually the core idea was the use of HPC to solve business problems. And just as a historical point, this was actually part of an initiative called ICT Initiative Innovation for Manufacturing SMEs. And it was funded by a program or initiative called Factories of the Future. So it was very much a political development. There was a lot of interest to make sure that the invest that we had in supercomputers, and the slide down there says on the road to exascale. Well, we're now very much approaching exascale. But the idea was to make sure that science and industry could benefit from the use of HPC. On that picture down there, it features in the center our coordinator at that time, from Mark Parsons from UPCC, but he was speaking to Monsieur Barnier there at the industry trade fair in Hanover, and explaining how sort of various industrial applications could benefit from making use of HPC, and SMEs was the focus. So right from the start, the Fortissimo approach was to execute experiments. It's not about doing research. It's not about trying things out. It's about actually seeing that you can solve a real business challenge using HPC. And what we learned from those first two projects is that the best experiments were obtained via open calls. And what you see in the latter FF projects is that we would just focus on using open calls to generate the sub-projects. Back then, Fortissimo and Fortissimo 2 executed 92 experiments and generated a whole heap of really impressive business success stories, which you can find in the booklet given there and via the website there. That booklet includes a lot of different types of success stories. But I picked on a couple here. The one on the left was manufacturing steel. That experiment actually won an innovation award from IDC. And you see the sort of outputs we're looking for are not, this is how the code scaled, this is the performance efficiency, these are the parallel programming techniques we use. No, we're looking for what did it mean for your business? And they were able to show that they could reduce loss of steel, and in terms of 6,000 tons a year. On the other side, classical modeling and simulation application, CFD, optimizing performance for aerodynamics for a car. But the interesting things for the business impact were that the company could tell us we could reduce our design costs, we could reduce the use of wind tunnel testing, we could reduce prototyping costs and reduce our time to market. So those were operational advantages that they were targeting with those experiments. We had many others were looking at creating software services that we use for new businesses. So this was very much all on manufacturing. Things did change quite a bit with the last Fortissimo project, which terminated or completed in October 2023. The same sort of constructs you'll see with FFplus, small number of partners, and we expect a large number of experiment partners or sub-project partners, third parties. In that case, we had 42 experiments with 118 organizations from 22 countries, very broad spread. We did have, again, a focus on manufacturing. Just to emphasize that manufacturing focus is history. That's not the case in FFplus. Okay, so this shows you the range of applications and the countries involved in the past FF3 or HPC experiment. I'll not dwell on this because today, this afternoon, we're looking at a very different type of sub-project, different type of focus on the technology to be investigated. But I will say something about the success stories. What if you follow the link, the QR code on the right, you'll get to the web page showing all the success stories, and you can actually search through that. And what I did was I searched for the topic AI, and you'll see that already with FF for your HPC, AI was finding its way into many of the experiments performed, and for a range of applications. So there you can see natural language processing, analysis of sales approaches for market innovation, productivity in agriculture, quite a lot of different set of applications, and a number of them using AI in those experiments. Otherwise, all the success stories are gathered in the second edition of the FF for your HPC booklet. You can see some examples there. And I recommend having a look at some of the videos. We will, again, in FFplus, be targeting the production of high-quality videos to explain what was done, to explain the business impact to others. And that's a really important point. I'll come back to that point. So the objectives of FFplus, again, we empower SMEs through advanced computational capabilities using HPC and help them to drive innovation, enhance competitiveness. Of course, we expect the SMEs involved in the project, with the sub-projects that we're funding, to gain benefit, solve their business problems. But the big output, the main impetus or the objective is to use those success stories to reach out to others in the European SME ecosystem to say, this can be done. These SMEs could benefit from use of HPC and benefit in terms of improving their business. You could too. So that's the main motivation for what we're doing. Yes, the SMEs involved should benefit, but the story is for the growth, the bigger ecosystem. For that, we'll be executing 6 open calls, or rather 3 tranches of each with 2 calls. So that we have 3 calls for business experiments and 3 for innovation studies, with a total funding budget of over 24 million euros. And the plus in the name FFplus is the fact that going beyond the sort of business experiments you saw a few slides back, the classical Fortissimo HPC approach, we have these new innovation studies, and they have a very different nature. We're targeting the support of European SMEs and startups that are already active in the field of generative AI technology, that have HPC prowess, knowledge, but they lack the necessary large-scale computational resources to scale up what they're doing. So it's very much, and the focus in the name, the development of these technologies using large-scale HPC. That's very different than the business experiments, which are addressing SMEs new to HPC. As you saw a couple of slides back, FF for EuroHPC had a very compact consortium. That's true of FFplus as well. The 6 partners from FF for EuroHPC are complemented by Cyprian from Poland. The project is coordinated by HLRS University of Stuttgart. It started on the 1st of May this year and will have a total duration of 48 months. It's funded by the EuroHPC joint undertaking through the Digital Europe funding program. If you go to the website for FFplus, you will, and you're looking to submit a call, you will find this page, and you'll see straight away there are 2 areas where you could click to go further. And I'm going to be talking this afternoon about the innovation studies. The other webinar earlier today covered the business experiments. Okay, so as I said, it's innovation studies for the development of generative AI. The deadline of the call is the 4th of September at 1700 hours, Brussels time. The expected duration of the innovation studies is 10 months with a targeted start in December this year, if all goes well with the evaluation process. Depends on the volume of proposals we get. And the indicative total funding budget for all of the innovation studies through this call that I'm talking about is 4 million euros. Objectives of the call. So we're addressing the needs of SMEs and startups that are already proficient in generative AI and also HPC, so that they know what they're expected to get from the use of large scale computing resources. And we want the target is to strengthen European SMEs in the area of generative AI. As ever with Fortissimo, the sub-projects, the innovation studies should be driven by the business needs. And we're looking not for SMEs new to HPC, but proficient and actually highly competent in their area. The requirement is that the innovation studies should use large-scale European HPC resources. So we're thinking about the pre-EXA and exascale supercomputers. And they should use them to develop and customize generative AI models such as foundation and large language models. It's not foreseen that you would be operating those models. So that would be outside the scope of the call. It's the development and customization of such models using large-scale supercomputing systems. Very different than those of you who listen to the webinar on business experiments. What I'm going to explain now is very different. The innovation studies are shorter, they're 10 months, but it's expressly foreseen that it will be possible to submit a proposal for an extension of the study. If the developments that are performed are evaluated successfully. So then you will be eligible to submit a proposal for an extension in a subsequent call. So in theory, you could have 3 successful submissions and have 3 periods of 10 months in each of the tranches of the open calls. In order that we can perform an evaluation of which innovation studies were successful, that will be done by external experts. We would need you to, or need the studies provide at the end of the seventh month of the 10-month period, an intermediate report explaining the expected impact and the results achieved so far. And based on that evaluation, the top 70% of those studies would be eligible to submit, in theory, to submit a new proposal for an extension period. So that is very different than we've seen in the business experiments. It's very different than what's been done before in the Fortissimo projects. So now expectations. So when you read expectations, these are what we hope to see or expect to see in proposals and studies. That means you should look very carefully at this, because you should be trying to deliver on these expectations in your proposal. Of course, as ever, we need the proposal to be fully aligned with the objectives we just discussed. And then to explain and justify the business challenge or the business prospect, and why generative AI provides a solution, why you need new model development, why the development is timely, why could it not have been done before, or why it's now the right time, and what are the obstacles that you identify that need to be overcome. And of course, we've said that the use of large-scale systems is necessary. Present the expected business impact of using large-scale HPC and the path to success that you see. So path to success means the potential value propositions and the process you foresee for value creation. Define the specific objectives to successfully address the business challenge and the proposal work plan in terms of a machine learning life cycle. So put your plan together in terms of how will this lead to solving the challenges that I have, or the business prospect. Provide a detailed description and demonstrate the availability of suitable training data. So you have to explain to the experts who are going to evaluate, where is the data coming from, how can you get, what are the rules for accessing it, how can you guarantee access, what are the characteristics of the models to be developed, and how that feeds back into training and exploitation. Explain the performance metrics and the baselines for specify methods to ensure experiment reproducibility, sorry, it's difficult to say. And then we expect you to be aware of the EU guidelines for trustworthy AI and assess the risks that you have with your approach and how you're going to adhere to those guidelines or mitigate risks should they arise. As ever, we need all the proposals to define the resources and the associated costs, so suitably justify the resources needed. Of course, personnel resources have to be commensurate with the work plan. You should identify gaps in the current processes that you need to implement in the proposed action. Quite important, or absolutely important, is HPC resources. It's expected that you would use the Euro HPC computing systems or potentially similar national actions to get access to the large-scale systems. The Euro HPC JU has an access system with regular deadlines for submitting proposals for use, and the relevant access scheme for the innovation studies is the AI and data-intensive applications access system. Okay. So maybe some of the people on the call could go on mute, please. Or Tina, maybe you can mute. If you're wondering about this, or you don't have experience with these systems, then it should be possible to contact your national competence centres. There's a type on the slide, should be small s there, NCC, or the HPC national competence centres that are acting under the umbrella of the EuroCC2 project. And they have a mission to reach out to SMEs in their countries. They're aware of the ecosystem. They know about the GAU systems and the access systems. So you can talk to them about how to, which would be the appropriate resources for your application, or your software, and the application process for those access systems. Data management plan, because it's expected that data and use of the data for training, etc., for example, it will be a critical issue. Your data management plan should cover policies for data access, use, sharing, outline methods for protecting sensitive or personal data, should that be relevant, and the expectation is that you incorporate FAIR principles in their implementation when applicable. I've already mentioned providing success stories will be as important for the innovation studies as for the business experiments in the other set of activities. And we would be expecting to not only have flyers and booklets, but also videos, so multimedia form. And we need you to be able to support the project and identify the business benefits realized or obtained. So we're not talking about technical data that we want to publish. We're looking at the business relevance of what you're doing, how it identifies or creates new opportunities or expands the existing opportunities. And of course, I've already mentioned it, in order to allow this possibility for a submission of an extension, we need the pre-final results and potential impact report to be provided. Coming now then to eligibility criteria. So there is a restriction on the organizations that are eligible to receive funding. So this is either organizations with a head office in an EU member state, or in a country, an associated country that is eligible to receive Digital Europe funding. So if you're unsure, please check about that, whether your country is associated to the Digital Europe program, and that's different than Horizon Europe. So the rules there are different. In all cases, with Fortissimo, natural persons are not eligible to receive funding, so individuals. We have a definition of main and supporting participants. The main participant is the SME or startup whose business challenge is addressed. So it's the SME with the competence in generative AI that is defining the task, is defining the approach for the study. And then, where necessary, where justified, there could be supporting participants, and they are there to support that main participant to complete the tasks foreseen in the work plan. The SME participation, so the main SME is restricted to either the business experiments or the innovation studies, but not both. So they're mutually exclusive. We expect the applications, the proposal, to be submitted by the main participant, providing a business case and a challenge, and optionally, and if well justified, up to 2 supporting participants. And in all cases, the participants must have a clearly defined role. So the maximum number of consortium partners for the innovation studies is 3. And a boundary condition we have is that the supporting participants may only perform engineering activities, or to be more precise, only engineering activities are eligible for funding. So activities that are not eligible for funding include, for example, business consultancy, marketing initiatives, administrative tasks, and other non-engineering activities. As a note, none of the FFplus participants is eligible to participate in an innovation study or a business experiment for that matter. So there will be support provided from the project to all of the studies. There's a specific work package set up for that. But that will be general support for all of the sub-projects funded through the Open Call, but direct participation in any of the studies is not allowed. We have some funding conditions, and they're slightly more complicated than we've seen in the past. So I'll go through these carefully. The third parties, so Fortissimo FFplus is using what's formerly called the financial support for third parties. So all of the participants in innovation studies are third parties to the project. They will receive 100% funding of the eligible direct costs that are incurred. Specifically, no indirect costs or overheads will be funded. So it's only the direct costs. I already mentioned the duration expenses. Oh, sorry, there's a typo. That should read innovation studies. Is 10 months with a maximum funding budget of 200,000 for the SME main participant. And the maximum funding for an innovation study as a whole is 300,000. The funding limits for the supporting participants in this call, i.e. FFplus Call 1 Type 2, is 150,000 and a maximum of 300,000 over all FFplus innovation studies. The majority, the main part of the funding requested should be allocated to the main participant. And if that's not the case, then you really need to justify why you've deviated from that principle. We have a number of budget categories that are eligible for funding with some criteria. I think the most obvious one is that personnel costs need to be commensurate with the work to be performed. So that's just normal. For equipment, only specialized equipment necessary for performing the innovation study is permitted. So things like common use equipment is not eligible. So buying laptops, monitors, etc. is not eligible for funding. Travel needs to be justified in terms of the necessity for performing the innovation study. Compute resources need to be justified, and the expectation, or ideally, would be that the Euro HPC systems will be used. And of course, they're provided free of charge. If you're not going to do that, or you're not going to apply for it, then you really advise you to duly justify the decision. Should you need specialized software licenses to perform the work, those are eligible, but not licenses for general standard software, such as MS Office. And if you need to buy access to data or data collections, that is also eligible to be funded by the study. Coming then to the evaluation criteria, these are different than people will have been used to with the past Fortissimo projects. These are specific to this type of call. Important, as ever, is impact, covering the study's prospects for innovation, commercial viability, potentially also societal relevance, providing this vision of success and value creation, which also reflects the SME's business models and exploitation plans, and of course alignment with the objectives of the call. Excellence covers both conceptual and technical excellence. So conceptual excellence covers the soundness of the approach, and and the approach to bridge gaps to go from where you are now to a successful innovation study implementation impact. For technical excellence, covers the technical requirements and justifying technical choices, providing the right performance metrics for evaluating your work, establishing the baseline performance where you're starting, and ensuring that this study could be reproduced, or the experiment in the work you're doing. Implementation covers the quality of the project's work plan and data management plan in there. The distribution resources to organizations, and the capacity of the applicant or applicants to carry out the proposed work, and the justification of the computing resources requested. In this case, each criterion has a score between 0 and 5, so the maximum score is 15. There is an overall threshold set for the sum over the 3 criteria is set to 10. So proposals scoring below 10 will not be eligible to receive funding. And you need a minimum score of 3 on each of the criteria. Equally weighted criteria. If it gets down, when we rank the proposals, if there are, we need to handle equal scores or tie break, then the order for doing that is impact, excellence, implementation. And then if things are still tied, we would look at the requested total funding. So the proposal submission, I already mentioned, the deadline is September 4th, 1700 hours Brussels local time. Submissions in English, and exclusively using in electronic form via the submission tool. What you'll have to do is upload 2 PDFs. The first part is administrative, the second is content. The details of formatting and guidelines for the length of various sections are given in the call announcement, but I would like to emphasize 2 important points. Part A is strictly the administrative part. Do not add anything. Please avoid extraneous information or appendices to it, because we will reject proposals that do not stick to the template. So anything added in will not be accepted. Similarly with part B, which is the bulk of the proposal, that's where all the content is. We've set a 12-page limit, which excludes the cover page and any appendix with scientific literature references. So please make sure you stick to the 12-page limit, including checking your PDFs, however you generated them. Make sure that when you move from word processing to a PDF that you didn't get additional pages just through formatting problems. 12 pages max, excluding the cover page and scientific references. I mentioned there are 2 areas on the website where you will be able to click in to pursue further going towards open call submission. We've been talking now about the innovation studies. Both of the areas separately provide a lot of information. There is the call announcement proposal guide. That's the definitive document about the call conditions. Please read it very carefully. We provide Word documents as templates for the Part A and B exemplars. We have an FAQ page and a proposer evaluator checklist. That proposer evaluator checklist is there to let you, or we provide it to the expert evaluators. We ask questions to the experts. Did these proposals address the following points? If we're asking our experts to look at those, proposals should look at them very carefully, because these are the questions proposals should be answering. And finally, via this area of the website, you will be able to arrive at the proposal submission tool. If all the documentation is nevertheless not enough to answer all of your questions, we have email set up where you can send in requests about processes and generic issues, and someone from the scapos team will respond and provide answers in that. What we can't do is answer detailed questions about the technology you're planning, the details of your proposal, but we will answer all the questions about limits and consortia and eligibility and funding limits and so on. So the generic questions, following the call announcement text, this is what we'll be able to answer for you.